Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick Garemo from McKinsey Abu Dhabi.
And I am Martin Hjerpe from McKinsey in Stockholm.
18 months ago, at the first GII conference in Istanbul, we launched a report called Infrastructure Productivity, Saving $1 Trillion. Since then, the report essentially argued that while funding is heavily debated, infrastructure productivity, or rather the lack thereof, is the key issue or challenge facing this industry. Since then, we've continued the research. And today, we'd like to do two things. One, we'd like to share a couple of facts on the global industry, but more importantly, we'd like to show to you an approach for how to assess the effectiveness of an infrastructure delivery system at the national, regional, or city level, and how that can be used as a starting point for a transformation to actually capture this improvement opportunity. But let's start with a couple of the facts. So first of all, no matter how you look at it, infrastructure is a huge industry, broadly defined if you include real estate. The spending in 2012 was $9 trillion. That's roughly 10% of global GDP, and the number is expected to increase over the next couple of years as urbanization increases and environmental demands increases. Fact number two, this is also an industry which is fraught by challenges. First of all, project selection is very often biased. We're all aware of bridges to nowhere and how spending is not always done in the most optimal way across regions or asset classes in a country. Secondly, project delivery is very often poor. 80% of roads in India are delayed due to land acquisition issues. 20% is the average overrun on roads projects globally. 40% is the average overrun on bridge projects and tunnel projects globally. More than half of mega projects defined as larger than $1 trillion go significantly over both on time and budget. Lastly, there's also a very clear bias towards new investments as opposed to maintaining the existing infrastructure, the results of which we see in potholes in roads and deteriorating infrastructure. The other thing is that this is an industry that doesn't really improve. So while over the past 20 years, the rest of the economy has seen significant productivity improvements in the developed world, infrastructure is actually not improving. We've seen flat, or in some cases even negative productivity development over the past 20 years. Fact number three. Good thing is, we actually know what to do about it. As part of our research, we reviewed some 400 different cases and identified a number of best practices. First of all, fact-based project selection, making sure that you have clear socioeconomic objectives, that you link your infrastructure investments to those objectives, making sure that you do system-wide planning and prioritization across asset classes, and making sure that you actually have a fact-based, rigorous review of all projects. Not only eliminates bad projects, but it also reduces the risk for project overruns further down. Streamlining delivery. Best practices include everything from making sure that you have efficient and effective supply markets to making sure that you have a rigorous project execution process, that you apply lean construction techniques, and that you incentivize contractors to do that. Making the most of your existing infrastructure, managing demand through education, communication, and pricing, making sure that you improve the economic utilization of your existing assets, either through lean operations of ports or by applying technological solutions to increasing capacity of roads, airports, or the like, often at a fraction of the cost of new infrastructure. In addition, we also saw that having strong infrastructure governance capabilities as well as robust funding are sort of key enablers to make sure that you can actually reduce the spend. If you consistently applied existing best practices at the global level, the total improvement potential would be roughly 40%. The number is obviously theoretical, but it gives you a sense of what the potential is if you're running a country, region, or city. So why doesn't this happen?
Indeed. Why does this not happen if we know that there are so many best practices out there and countries and regions are actually making this happen in slivers? Well, the unfortunate answer is Nick and I are not here to give you the one silver bullet that delivers the $1 trillion in a couple of years. That would be a fantastically valuable bullet. We don't have it. But the answer is very complex, right? It's different in different countries. It's different across different asset classes. Sometimes it's different within a country, between different cities or different regions. So to try to sort this out and get through this Gordic knot, you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. You need to understand, how effective is my current delivery system for infrastructure? What are the different components of it and how do they perform? And also, what are others doing? What best practices out there exist, and how do I learn from those top performers that exist? Therefore, what are the different gaps and the major opportunities that I have, and how can I design a transformation roadmap that actually targets the major gaps and does it in a sequenced way that helps me come through these different things? So if I'm in charge with fixing the infrastructure delivery system in a country or a region or a city, where do I start answering these questions? Well, there's a couple of things. First, starting in a fact-based assessment and structured assessment of the infrastructure balance sheet. You need to know where you stand to know how to get where you want to go, right? Understanding what's the value of the different assets, what is the state of the assets, the quality, is there a maintenance need going forward, what are the spend that we plan. Second, you need to go through the 5 different levers and enablers that Nick talked about and think through, for each of these, what are the best practices and how do I stack up on those? I'll come back to this in a second. Finally, you need to think about what are the performance outcomes. What does my infrastructure delivery system actually deliver? What's the cost versus international benchmarks? What's the project performance that I get? Here, when we do these kind of investigations in countries, we typically see surprising differences. You can have 2 neighboring countries building a road in a similar kind of geography, and you see 30–40% price differences or cost differences. Same thing in real estate, maybe 20%, and in some of the rail systems, we see over 100% cost differences. And understanding how that comes across is important. Coming back to this middle piece, the 5 different levers, this needs to be much more granular than just talking about it on this highest level, right? And if you start to break down the 5 parts, the fact-based project selection, the streamlined delivery, etc., we look at this across 78 different dimensions. And these 78 different dimensions try to describe what are poor practices that exist in many places, what are good practices and what are best practices, and try to compare yourself and score yourself on those to understand what's the fingerprint of my infrastructure delivery system. Where do I have the biggest gaps versus best practice, and how can I then address those? And when we're doing this now in an increasing number of countries and regions, there's a couple of themes that pop out that are quite interesting. First, there's no country that's best practice across the board. Even high-performing countries with high-performing infrastructure delivery systems have areas of significant improvement opportunity. Second, no 2 countries or regions are alike. Even if it's neighboring countries, very similar political history, etc., the fingerprints always look very different. So you can't just copy another country's best practices. You need to tailor them to your own prerequisites. And thirdly, which is a bit interesting, high-performing countries seem to underestimate their own performance, while low-performing ones seem to overestimate their ones. That's a bit of interesting, I guess, human nature a bit, but it also has implications for how you design your transformation system and how you set up the ambition levels and drive for true change and the leapfrog that we had before. So, if this is how you think about improving a delivery system within a region or a country. How do you actually move from this to impact on a global scale? How do we get the full $1 trillion opportunity? And we've now had 10 minutes to explain how to get the $1 trillion. So that's $100 billion a minute. I hope you think that's valuable minutes. But one thing is, of course, rolling out the different infrastructure delivery system improvement efforts across the world. But when we do that, we see two other areas that are lacking. The first is a platform for knowledge sharing to figure out these best practices that we talked about. What are they? And how can we share those and learn from each other across geographies and across countries? And coupled to that, what's the quantitative benchmarks, the cost benchmarks, the productivity benchmarks, the project delivery benchmarks that we can compare and learn from so that we can help accelerate the change and capture this $1 trillion even faster? These two areas are things that do not exist today, but I think there could be a fantastic opportunity here in the next couple of days to continue that conversation.
So to conclude, the improvement opportunity is immense. To capture that productivity improvement, all of us need to start doing things differently. And we truly look forward to having this debate with you over the next 48 hours in terms of what we actually could and should do together. Thank you.